out there, and welcome to another session of Mita's Deep Dive Express modules, which are being brought to you by our gracious sponsor, 420 Collections. 420 Collections includes two brands under their umbrella, 420 Medibles, which are some deliciously potent medibles available at dispensaries throughout the state of Arizona, and also 420 Skincare, which is their CBD-infused topical line available throughout the country. For today's session, we have some very important topics and is called the build-out process from planning and execution. So two very key important parts of that process. So today we have an extremely knowledgeable panelist here from Grow America. We have co-founder and managing partner, Mr. David Fettner.
Thanks, Caleb. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so you want to tell us a little bit of a background about you and about your company before we start diving into all of the details here today.
Yep, no problem. So Grow America Builders, we're a national construction company. I think we're one of the only that specializes only in the cannabis industry. So if it's in cannabis, we build it. That's our sole focus. And I've been a builder for about 20 years, maybe a little bit more at this point. Built everything you can imagine under the sun, built food laboratories and churches, massage schools, high-end homes. And about 4 years ago, pivoted to this company with my partner, Mike Calentis. And, since then we've been building, all over from coast to coast. I also have a background in law. I was a real estate attorney, also concurrently as I ran the other business for about 20 years as well, focused in zoning and land use. And it's kind of come in handy, obviously, in the cannabis world, the compliance and everything, especially when you're building.
Certainly.
Yeah,
so yeah, that gives you a leg up both in understanding the process, understanding what options you have, because throughout it's always possible in the build out process, you may run into a little hiccup or something unplanned. And by having your background there, you're able to leverage that experience and get clients to the finish line.
It helps. And we also help on the front end, when there's municipal hearings. I served on my local zoning board for about 8 years. So I was a zoning board administrator. I know how to talk the talk and walk the walk when it comes to hearing time. So we've also assisted with our clients, when it comes time for their special use permit hearings or variances. So it's one of those things that always comes in handy. I always have it in my back pocket.
Definitely. So you said about 4 years ago, transitioning into cannabis. Would love to hear just a little bit about your thought process and how you came to that decision of why you wanted to pursue that route.
For sure. So I was sitting in my office and cannabis was coming down the pipe to be fully legal in Chicago. We're in the Chicago area. And, we're looking at different possibilities to have a dispensary on our own, myself and my partner. And we're looking at, the buy-ins were just exorbitant. And the application process in Illinois was very expensive as well. I think, you could spend between $250,000, $350,000 just on your application, not even get it. I think buy-ins at the time were between 5 and 7 million to buy a license. So it was like, okay, well, we wanted to get into cannabis somehow, long-time consumer, really, passionate about the plant. And I'm like, well, cannabis is really, it's here. So what can we do to get in the industry? And then like a light bulb went on, like, hey, dummy, you can build these things. So I'm like, I absolutely can. I built everything else. So started researching into, how to build a dispensaries was our first focus, right? How to build a dispensary. And then just started pounding the pavement, making calls to, licensees, applicants, say, hey, we're a builder. Can we build your dispensary? We built a flagship dispensary near Midway Airport for a customer, the Midway dispensary, about a 5,000 square foot dispensary. And then we built for Verano, their Zen Leaf brands. We're one of their preferred builders for Zen Leafs. And then started from there and, started in Chicago and then New Jersey, Arkansas. Next thing you know, we're in Montana and, Michigan, you name it. So that's how it didn't expect to build national so quickly, but that's just where the market is.
Yeah. And you had it was right place, right time. You had the idea. And I think what I heard in there, the biggest is you pounded the pavement. You saw the opportunity and you went for it and you had to persevere. And I'm sure that there were some challenges at the beginning of either people not understanding who you are or hesitant to work with a new company? What are some things that you were able to overcome some of those challenges?
Absolutely. Well, there's a learning curve, just like in anything. So, I think the biggest thing that we sell ourselves on now is that we've gone through that learning curve, right? The first time we were building, we also didn't have the benefit of working with, a set of plans, right? That was a veteran in the cannabis industry also. So we're kind of both starting from square one. So there's a lot of learning curves on that first project. It ended up great, but I was able to look at some of the things. For instance, I don't think we had any ventilation in that vault when it came our way. And I was, the fact that I've done different food laboratories and whatnot, I'm like, well, I think we're going to want some ventilation. Just knowing cannabis and knowing bud and flower, like you don't want that to sit in a Chicago summer in the vault, when we have high humidity and everything. So, hey, let's try to get a split system in here, or a mini system, just things like that. And just using common sense to, by the fact of knowing cannabis and knowing how to build, we're able to get through some of that. The security system, obviously, it's a little bit different than when you're building a typical project. I think looking back on it now, when you look at a dispensary, it's a cross between like a bank, a pharmacy, and like a high-end retail facility, right? And you're kind of merging all these together. So you have to take a little bit of each part and put it in there. But got through the learning curve after the first, 1.5, and from there it's been smooth sailing.
Nice. So you kind of touched on, and I think it's really important for today, of there's different types of facilities. There's going to be different planning that goes into that, different variables that you're having to think of. And you're absolutely right. I can tell you my first vault room had a just single air intake and Arizona heat, as you can imagine. We ended up putting in a standalone air conditioner about the second week we got in. Those are the things that you just don't know if you don't know them.
Exactly. Right. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. What are the main types of cannabis industry construction?
So the main types that we build, that we've seen, is obviously dispensaries, right? Both medicinal and rec. Grow houses. So we build, indoor warehouse grow, and then obviously greenhouse. Those are the two main types. Outdoor is becoming more and more popular, and I think the consensus is an outdoor grow. There's an argument, and we don't claim to be experts, on it. We're not growers, but that the outdoor actual product is probably the best because you're using Mother Nature, right? But obviously, there's nothing to build when you're growing outdoor. So indoor warehouse grow,
fences, right?
Exactly right. Some nice security towers and fences. But so indoor warehouse grow, greenhouse, and then consumption lounges, which is becoming again more and more popular, and extraction and processing. And that can range from a tiny little room, that's adjacent to your grow facility, or it can be a big processing center. So those are the main types: dispensaries, grow, extraction, processing, and consumption.
Yep. And Arizona is unique in that the Arizona license gives the operator the ability to do all of those things. So it's really important for any of the aspiring social equity applicants of understanding that there's going to be a different process. There are different types of facilities, and knowing that you have the resources and the experts to lean on that know they've already tripped up on all of those things that you may trip up
exactly.
on.
Exactly. Yep.
So let's shift in and go into dispensaries. This is where you said you had gotten your start and helped you to learn quite a few things about that whole process. So what makes a dispensary build out so unique? You touched on it a bit of the combinations, but maybe elaborate on it for a little bit.
Sure. So, a dispensary, you have the front of the house, which you want to have, the right aesthetic. And for some people, that's the sleek Apple Store type look. For other people, that could be more of a traditional, eclectic type of look, something that's more apothecary type facility. That's the front of the house, right? And then you get to the back of the house, you have a vault, and there's different ways of constructing the vault. You have when it's medicinal, you have different rules and regulations. You have to have the right, point of sale areas. You have, the right ventilation. Some facilities, some dispensaries, if it's in a strip mall, the landlord will require you to do an odor mitigation system, right? You have a freestanding dispensary, you may not need odor mitigation. But again, like I said, you're looking at it from the point of view of a nice high-end retail facility that's going to want to bring people in. You have the medical aspect, which, most dispensaries are still medical at this point. So it's, like a pharmacy, you need to have privacy, consultation rooms. And then it has to be secure like a bank. You need, 100% surveillance. You have to have the vault. You have to have limited access. So when you're building a dispensary, you need to put, all those components into place. You're building, almost 3 buildings in one.
3 buildings in one. That's a good way to look at it of each of these parts, and thinking of it not just from that, but also like flow, because you're going to want to think about your customer flow different than you think about your employee flow and their storage areas and break rooms.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about it is, and again, because we've done many of these and we see what works and what doesn't, and we also get to see how the sausage is made between the different companies, right? So, we're flies on the wall, we're listening in, and, you want to make sure that the retail team is on the same page with the construction team, is on the same page with the compliance team. And, we've learned a lot where if, for instance, I'll give you for instance, so you have the reception area, right? Every dispensary, you come in, you have to be checked in, check your license, there's a reception area. Well, if you're in the Midwest, right, that desk is right near the front door. And in the winter, it gets very cold. In the summer, it gets very hot. So you want to make sure that the reception area has the proper flow of air conditioning or heat, right? You want to maybe beef that up a little bit more because you have a lot of foot traffic coming in and out all the time. Another aspect is the vault. We've seen many dispensary owners call us back a year later. Hey, how can we increase the size of this vault? We built it too small. We always say, when looking at the vault, if you build it, they will come, right? Build the bigger vault because it's not a bad problem to fill it up. But when it gets too small, you've state compliance. You can't just add, a little day vault next to it, or you can't just add a safe. You need to make sure that you have the proper vault. So, that's something that we always look at. If you have the space, get a bigger vault. And then that also kind of correlates with the back of the house. Like you're saying, the employee break room, make sure you have enough storage back there, because the front of the house is going to look great and you're going to want to have the right amount of POS stations. The back of the house, though, you don't want that to be cramped. You want to have easy efficiency, easy flow, and also what comes into play too is, how are your POS stations going to be? Are they going to be kiosks where, it's a standalone kiosk and you put your order in and then you go and pick it up at a different location? Or is it going to be actual, bud tenders sitting at the point of sale areas too? And again, we take all that into account. A lot of times we're hired just as the builder. Here's a set of plans, but we're also hired as designer consultants as well, where we'll help the consumer or the customer design the actual facility for them.
Yep, and think through, because that may be some logistics in their operations they haven't thought through. I mean, I know there's the big one of deli style versus pre-pack, and that completely changes your entire operations. Because I know I had to have a space for breakdown to be able to do all the pre-packaging that I had there versus when I came up to Oregon, we did deli style up here at my stores, and we had 18 jars, and it was actually a pretty easy process for opening and closing because it was a jar. So it made it, but then I also had to think every one of my transactions is going to take a bit longer. So I have to plan accordingly there. I had to have different scales and set up my POS completely different because of it being deli style.
Well, some people, we've heard some, stores where people will reduce their amount of kiosks because somebody will come in, they'll put their order in, they'll go grab a cup of coffee or meet a friend. Oh, hey, I'm outside. They'll meet a friend, get distracted and not come back. I mean, who's not coming back for their cannabis? I don't know, but it happens. And they're sitting there with the order already prepackaged, ready to go, and nobody's coming to pick it up. So it's just that you have to think logistics and how you want your facility to be run. But there is a lot that goes into, like you were saying, the flow and the efficiency of the space. And also some states don't even allow you to have product on the floor, right? Like Illinois, you can't have product on the floor. Other states you can have the smell jars. So that's all depends on how you're going to set up your front of the house too, your displays.
Yep, and Arizona is one of those markets that there is more flexibility on the operator standpoint. There isn't a explicit restriction against pre-pack versus deli style. It's ultimately, it comes down to the operator and what they decide they want to do.
Yeah.
So with the dispensaries, aside from like a ground up new construction, obviously that you're working with a blank slate, that's you can pick and decide within your budget of what's going to work. But For most of the social equity applicants, it's going to be an existing building that they're looking
Mhm.
at retrofitting. So what kind of building would you recommend looking for that makes that conversion the easiest?
So most buildings are pretty easy to convert. We see a lot of restaurant conversions, old restaurants, a lot of old retail, old banks. Everybody's want to look for the old bank because they say, oh, well, it's got a vault in it already. But chances are where that existing vault is in the bank is not where you're going to want your vault, right? But we've done fair share of bank remodels, but they're also just they lend themselves nicely to drive-through, right? Because you're doing a lot more drive-through right now.
Yep.
So, the banks, the layout of the banks are really nice. Some banks have a basement, right, that you can use for some of the back of the house. So, it really, the one building I say people should stay away from is, that 70-year-old dilapidated building that just is going to be a nightmare to convert, just whether it's a dispensary or whether it's anything. You're just going to spend a lot of money demoing walls, asbestos abatement, lead paint. So, a building that was built, within the last 20 years that can be easily convertible. And, for chances are there are a lot of those out there to find.
Yep. And then ultimately a big part of it is just going to be on where zoning allows it. So that, of course, is going to help to dictate. That's always going to be that first spot of what areas of the town can I actually even think about putting it here?
Right. And I will say, just because it's allowed, that doesn't mean you'll be allowed, because we've also run into it where we've had, I won't say many projects, we've had projects where it meets all the zoning requirements. But let's say, it's 508 feet from a school instead of 500 feet. So you're in the requirements, you're legally allowed to be there, but you'll have an alderman who may step in, or a city council member say, hey, even though this is technically allowed, you're still a little too close. I want it somewhere else. So, just because it says it, I wouldn't say it's set in stone. Always check with the local councilman, your local alderman or whoever's in charge.
Yep. And that ties into your experience of having been involved with that, of knowing it still is politics. I mean, we're still dealing with politics.
Absolutely.
and the viewpoints of the councilmen, the people that are in a position to be able to stop it. And also sometimes it's just public response. I mean, I've seen that where you get enough neighbors coming out and they'll prevent a spot from being able to open up.
All it takes are one or two, and cannabis is such a hot button topic. You have your people that know that cannabis is, it's in my opinion, okay, it's the least harmful, out of anything. It's not something that I would care if it was next to my kid's school or in a residential neighborhood. I have no problem with cannabis. Obviously, it's me. I'm in the industry and I'm a consumer. But we've seen many situations where you'll have a school that's flanked by 2 bars, and the school board will still not want a dispensary within 600 feet of it. So it's all and all it takes is 1 or 2 letters from parents, and there you have it. So it's really, you have to do the due diligence on it, and the zoning restrictions, while they're laid out, that doesn't always mean that it's set.
Yeah, and it's just finding the right areas and the right partners and the right communities, because ultimately to help to demonstrate to them about how you're going to be giving back, what you're going to do to benefit, the jobs that you're going to bring into it, all of the studies that show if it is an area that has maybe higher crime, putting in a dispensary actually reduces crime rates, given of all of the cameras and other things.
It reduces crime rates. It reduces, I'm a big proponent that it reduces the opiate epidemic that we have going on here, that it helps with so many things. And I can tell you how many ribbon cutting ceremonies we're at, and the mayor is there cutting the ribbon, the town president, the town attorney. It's so when you have a community that's on board, it really makes the process that much easier and streamlined.
Yep, definitely. So, what's a typical size for a dispensary? I mean, I know they can. I've seen 1,000 square feet, and I've seen 15,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
what are you typically seeing?
I think the sweet spot's around 4,000 square feet. That gives you a really nice front of the house that can give you, between 10, 15 POS stations. Gives you a nice back of the house, a good sized vault. So, I think that if you have 4,000 square feet, and that's a good size. But again, we've seen and done the 10,000 square foot one, and we've also, done less than 1,000 square feet. You know, it all depends on the market. If you're building a dispensary, you know, in Yellowstone County, Montana, you know, you don't need 10,000 square feet. If you're building it in, you know, Metro New Jersey, or Manhattan, you know, New York, when it comes legal, or, you know, in downtown Scottsdale, you're going to want a nice big, you know, 5,000 to 7,000 square foot dispensary, maybe even 10,000 square feet. Yeah.
Yep. I can attest to that. The first dispensary I opened in Arizona was 980 square feet, because this was 2013, and this is where we could find a landlord that wanted to work with us. That has since been moved to a facility that is upwards of 6,000 square feet.
Right.
So that's, and part of that is going to be also thinking through of, in your stages of your business development, it may make sense to come in at that size and then look at expansion. It's always important to think about of all of what you're going to be investing into that spot of, okay, is this a spot I can see myself being here for 5 to 10 years, to make sure on that recouping all of those upfront costs.
Yeah. And you know what? We also see a lot of forward-thinking owners who will purchase or lease a space that has an empty space adjacent to it, so that they can always knock down the wall and expand. And we've actually seen that and done that a few different times. So, you know, you have to get lucky and have a space that's vacant next to you, but they'll hold it. They may not need it and say, hey, in a few years, I want, you know, right of first refusal or whatnot, and then be able to expand or double the size.
Yep. Just know that it's you don't know if you don't ask.
Exactly. Yep.
So what's kind of along those lines of the typical size? So what would be a typical cost for building, renovating? What makes that go up or down? I mean, I know it's hard to put. It's usually like on a per square foot basis.
Per square foot. So we had an article published in Marijuana Venture magazine, and I gave the you know, cost difference between $350,000 and $3.5 million, because that's literally what we've seen. We've proposed bids for $350,000 dispensary and over $3 million. Again, size is a huge factor. You know, finishes, but I think, you know, on average, it's between $150 and $175 a square foot. Every dispensary is different, you know, whether you need to do a brand new parking lot and striping, whether it needs a new roof. Some dispensaries you can walk in, you don't need any new HVAC, right? The RTUs, the rooftop units are great as is. Some buildings you need a brand new, you know, RTU. So a lot of things take into account of how much it's going to be, right? You're going to have a brand new facade. You're going to keep the existing facade and just put a sign up. But, you know, we see it between 150 and 175 a square foot. Obviously it can go south of that, or it could go north of that.
Yep. And just kind of depending on size. So that gives a good ballpark, and those are always changing, because as we know, building materials are up 30, 40, sometimes 100%.
It's great. Building materials is crazy. I mean, luckily with commercial construction, you're using metal studs and not lumber, right? Lumber is really the item that's gone up. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on that. But again, it really depends on the infrastructure too. The infrastructure is what can really drive cost.
Yep. No, totally makes sense. So, what are some common mistakes that you've seen with people that makes you shake your head of just, I wish I could have been there to tell them to do something differently?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we kind of touched upon a little bit really with flow, right? Where you walk into a dispensary and you look around, like what were they thinking? Your front reception area is twice the size of your sales floor, right? You know, why do you have that? Or you know, there's three consultation rooms. Why do you have 3 consultation rooms when you only barely need 1? And then, you know, again, it's really with, you know, the vault, the small vault, and you see just the overflow and what they're doing with it. So, you know, a lot of that is just, you know, pre-planning, right? And looking at it before you start and making sure you have everything laid out properly. You know, and again, we talked earlier too about, you know, not the proper ventilation in the vault, and, you know, you have to retrofit that, which can be costly. So, you know, little mistakes like that, little things that will make the dispensary better, that just get missed at the front end.
Yep. Something is, I can give an example of lighting, of getting those fixtures that are about $100 versus the ones that are about $300-400, which is really what you need. And you look at it, it's a smaller cost. Like, yeah, okay, it's cost savings, but then it changes the experience, because then it changes the feel inside of the whole facility. I mean, it's things like that.
That's amazing that you said that, because my partner and I were just in Michigan, and we were in a dispensary. We work for a company that spends a lot and really has a lot of focus on their light fixtures. Okay. Different light fixtures, very nice, fancy light fixtures. And we were in a competitor's dispensary that didn't care about light fixtures, right? Just recessed can lights. And we're walking through and we're like, you know what? The light fixtures really make a difference. Like it really makes this dispensary right now feel, kind of ho hum and nothing that is really, jumps out at you. And when we look at what we've been building with, this other company, it really makes sense that they put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into the right light fixtures because it makes a huge difference just on how the space feels.
Yeah, it's going to impact your mood. I mean, the space and what we have, that's why there's so much research into design and planning and all of that forethought, because it's all about the experience. We respond to what we see around us.
Yeah,
there's colors.
Color scheme. I mean, right. Something that is not a big cost difference, whether it's going to be this color scheme or that, but it could go a long way. And, we've had many conversations with people where they say you can have dispensary A, dispensary B, and they can sell the same product. But if dispensary B is, is a lot nicer aesthetic and feels a lot more high end, that they could sell their cannabis for a lot more because people walk in and it's that experience. They feel like they are, now I don't know if I agree with that 100%, as far as if that is actually right, but that happens, right? You can have a big, beautiful, shiny dispensary, like I said, downtown Scottsdale that sells the same product as, a dispensary, a few miles away that was built for a fraction of the cost. And again, a little bit more, not as high end. And people feel like, oh, well, I'm getting a better product in this nicer one that's more expensive.
Yep. Nope. It's human psychology is a pretty funny thing, man, for sure. So let's go ahead and pivot into the next big type of construction, which is grow houses, which that encompasses a whole lot of different things. So what would you say is the best kind of structure to make a good grow house?
So as far as like an indoor warehouse grow, I'd say, any type of older warehouse or pole barn, works fine. When we're evaluating a building for a grow house, we look at a few things right off the bat, right? We look to see what's the infrastructure like? What type of power is coming into the building? Because, is it single phase electric or is it three phase? You really want / need three phase power to come into the building. That gives you, the ability to use LED lights. That gives you the ability to use three phase, lights. That gives you the ability to have a processing lab in there. So we'll look at a building. It could be a totally dilapidated old warehouse that has, busted out windows and a hole in the roof. But if it has the right water size coming in, and if it has good gas and it has three phase power, we're like, beautiful, because you can always replace windows. You can always fix the roof, but it's a lot harder to get, the power company to come in and bring in that three phase power. Chances are, if you are looking at a warehouse building, it probably already has three phase because that's common for industrial type construction. Where we come into challenges is where somebody wants to do a grow house and they're approved, right? They've zoning, but it's more in a residential neighborhood where you don't have the right power. You need to upgrade the water service. And it could be done, but that's just where it gets more costly because you're bringing all that infrastructure in. Yep.
We had to do that at our first grow up in Northern AZ where we had to bring in another 600 amps.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a huge process with APS. It was it was 6 months from application to actually being installed. And that's
you're going through their engineers, right? They gave you a full engineering proposal and there's a lot that goes into it, whether it's Arizona or Montana or Illinois, Michigan, you're still dealing with the local power company. It's not in my control. It's not in the owner's control. You're at the mercy of the local power company. But it gets done as long as you have enough time to do it. It gets done. But again, when we look to evaluate a building, we're looking to make sure it already has that infrastructure in it, because everything else, you're tearing everything down, all the walls, right? You're just starting with a clean slate. So you don't care what size this room is or what size that's all coming down. So it's really what infrastructure you need to upgrade to the building.
Yep. Totally makes sense. So we already kind of covered that on your site evaluation. Are there any other things besides infrastructure that you really look for? Is it, do you think about like geographic location and other dispensaries and part of that logistics?
No,
Or
not, for a grow house, we've seen them where it's an overlay district where you may have, 10 grow houses within, 1 square mile or something like that, or
Mhm.
that's really not an issue. An issue is when we're looking at a facility, we'll also look at security,
Mhm.
like, how close is it to, a large condo or apartment building that may be overlooking it, where you have a lot of eyes looking to see the day-to-day operations.
Mhm.
We're also looking to see, as far as topographics, is it below grade where you could have a lot of water runoff and possible flooding, which could completely
Okay.
ruin the product? Or are you more, on a higher slope? Do you have good drainage? So that type of thing, other than infrastructure, that we'll take into account.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Got to look at all of those other things around it,
Yeah,
not just the physical building, but
right.
yeah, the topography is a big one that
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought that up. So for a grow house, what are some of the main items and equipment that they're going to need and plan for?
Right. So when you're doing a grow house, and I'll preface this with saying that we always, always, always bring in the grower right off the bat, right? So we always say, okay, do you have a grower? If yes, let's get him on the team today. If not, we have a great grower who we bring into the projects, who we really love, because it's their baby, right? They're gonna direct what type of equipment, how they, because different growers have their different ways that they like to grow. Okay, and we are, again, we're no experts, but we will take direction from the grower, and we kind of step back, say, okay, how do you want to build this grow house? Let's do it together. We'll figure out the logistics of the construction of it, but you tell us what type of equipment, what type of lighting, right? So again, lighting, right? Light's huge. And so whether it's going to be LED or whether it's going to be the sodium lights, that's going to be a big cost differential. And it's going to be whether you have that 3-phase or single phase, right? Because
Mhm.
LED you can only use for the most part with 3-phase power, and it's a lot more expensive. I think it's $900 a light versus maybe $300 a light, right? So you have a big cost difference with that. So lighting, the fertigation system, right? The reverse osmosis water system to make sure you're getting rid of the heavy metals, dehumidification, climate control, which is huge, and then odor mitigation. So you have a lot of equipment when you're building a grow house. It's really two separate parts. It's the equipment, like I mentioned, and then the actual building of it. Building of a grow house, that's not that expensive. You're building, again, walls, you're framing, you're drywalling. There's going to be little components here and there, right? Gotta make sure it's secure, right? Are you going to want to kind of vault in? You obviously need a vault anyways, but are you going to want to vault in the canopy area or just leave it as is, right? So those are some things that go in consideration of the construction, but then you're bringing in the equipment, and you can't really do A without B, because you need to know what size all the equipment is, right? How big is that RO system that you need?
Yeah, where's
Right?
it going to go in that room?
Where's it going to go? Right? I mean, where are we going to put? What type of, how's the table setup going to be? Right, for all the tables. If we're doing lighting, how many lights per room? So things like that. So the equipment really goes hand in hand with the construction, and I think I hit on the major equipment items on there. But again, we take our direction from the grower. We don't claim to walk into a grow project and say, okay, this is how you're going to do it. This is the best way, because we're not the ones who are going to be there every day growing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a collaborative effort of you know
Team.
what to do
Yep.
once they've communicated what
Yep.
type of room and I need this type of room. Okay, so you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
need this many
Exactly.
struts, you're gonna need to think about
Yep.
each. You go down your five,
Yeah.
six things that I could see you just doing in your head right
Yeah.
now.
And the other thing is geographic, right? So when we very first started this business, we were making calls, and we were just talking to a guy who just had a grow house in Michigan, and he said he lost like this whole first harvest because he had hired an engineer who was from California, who didn't know about Michigan's high humidity and didn't know how to engineer our Midwest, right,
Yeah.
weather. And then the light bulb went on. From now on, when we work in that geographical area, we're only going to find an MEP engineer who is from that geographical area, right? So when we're
Yep.
building Out in Montana, we're going to find an engineer who's local, right? Colorado, Montana, Idaho, that area. When we're going in the Midwest, we'll find a local, engineer from Chicago, Detroit. Same thing for the Northeast. So I think it's important that the engineering of it is somebody who's local, so they have an understanding of the local climate.
Yep. And it's very, very important in Arizona with that very low humidity and high heat.
Yeah.
You still need dehumidifiers. There are some instances where you need humidifiers in order to get it, which is unique to
That is
Arizona.
unique. Yeah,
Most places you don't really even have to mess with that.
Right.
Yeah. So
that is
important things to think about. So that leads me to the next question about what are some pitfalls? Like, what are some things, particularly with grow houses, that you've seen, you've had to clean up for clients, kind of along those lines?
Well, like I just said, I think that, the number one thing is the climate control, right? The right climate control with the dehumidification or humidification system. That's huge. That's something that's just, I think, the number one killer of our product is the right engineering.
Yep.
Other than that, it's, again, we've seen it where that you don't think about it, but you need that vault, because when you have all the product, you have to put it, get it into the vault. If you have too small a vault, you have a bigger harvest. Now, what are you going to do with all the, the overage? Also, it's just like any other project with the support rooms, right? A lot of design goes into the canopy, right? The grow canopy, but you also have those support rooms that have to have the right flow and efficiency. That's something that we also see. Oh, well, we don't need as big of a mother room, or, we just can use this little closet, for the hazards. But when you get in the reality of it, in the day to day, you're going to want to make sure that those are all properly sized. Same thing with like a locker room, right? For the employees working there, so break room, locker room, those types of things that you with the dispensary, you put so much effort and design into the sales floor. And not always think about back of the house. And the same thing goes with the grows. You're putting a lot of thought and design into the canopy, but you're not really thinking about the support rooms.
Yep. Where are you going to dry it? Where are you going to store it? And especially if you're dealing in upwards of 10,000, 15,000 square feet of canopy, you need to have 1,000 square feet just for storage.
easily. And also, distribution and security. Right. Like, where are you bringing the deliveries in? Where are you coming out of? There's a lot that goes into it. And also, expansion. So when we're looking at a grow facility, we're always looking at, okay, if you want, can you expand? Do you have enough area to expand out? If you want, can you build a greenhouse on this property? Right. Does the zoning allow that? So that's another thing. You don't want to put all this time and effort and money into a nice grow house, and maybe want to expand in a few years and not have that ability, and then have to start all the way from scratch, across town with a different building.
Yep. Definitely important to plan for the future while staying within budget, but anticipating that you have to go into it with that mindset of, I'm going to grow, I'm going to expand, like my business is going to take off. You have to have that mindset going into it. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels.
Right. And you'll spend more money down the line too.
Yep, definitely. So what does a typical grow house construction cost? And at least in comparative to what we were talking about on the dispensary side?
Yeah. So a grow house, and I'm going to give you numbers that pretty much encompass everything, right? Soup to nuts, right? So the construction, the equipment, tables, lighting, the whole thing. On the low end, we usually see around $300 a foot. And then it could get up to almost $400 a foot. And again, at $400 a foot, you're talking about LED lighting, top of line fertigation system, great RO system. At $300 a foot, it's bare bones. You can still grow an awesome product, okay? But you're using fluorescent lighting, right? You're using, just the lower end equipment, but you can still get it done. Again, that includes everything. That's turnkey. You're out of there, and good luck on the harvest. So that's really what we see. We've had people call, say, "Oh, I was quoted $75 a square foot for this grow," and I don't see how. With the cost of equipment and lighting, everything, I don't see it. And I say, that's great. I'd be wary of it. But
because
everything
not
we
reasonable.
See,
I mean, materials cost what they cost.
Materials cost what they cost, and maybe whoever they talk to is quoting them just the grow equipment or just the building. Like, I see $75 a square foot on just the construction side, that sounds about right. But that doesn't include all the other aspects of the grow.
Yeah, that's talking about basically getting a shell building up to
Probably,
where
yeah.
you'd have some doors and
Yeah, you're right. You have some doors and some drywall. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But you're not growing anything.
So let's say in planning stages of for the social equity applicants, they're trying to figure out which direction that they want to go. So there's greenhouses, there's an indoor grow. We also talked a little bit about outdoor. So why go one direction versus the other?
Again, I don't claim to be the expert on which direction as far as growing, right? The best way to grow, but for cost benefit, for if you're just starting up, I think to retrofit an old pole barn would probably be your best route to start growing, right? It's already an existing structure, and even if you want to build a new one from scratch, they're not that expensive. You build it in an industrial area where you already have 3-phase power and good water. That's probably the best cost-effective way to get going on it. I think a greenhouse build is great because you're utilizing a lot more natural sunlight. You can do more hybrid where you can open it up. I think greenhouse, if you have the ability to. But a greenhouse, you're adding a whole nother aspect to it. It's a lot more complicated. You're bringing in the greenhouse manufacturers. It's getting re-engineered. You're going to have your head house, maybe 2 greenhouses. So, I love greenhouse grow. I like the greenhouse build. I like the product that comes out of a greenhouse. But I think for somebody just starting out, social equity applicants, I would probably recommend to just find like a good pole barn or build a pole barn on a property that already has the infrastructure. And that'd probably be the most cost-effective way to start off, with the ability to maybe expand or do a greenhouse on the property.
Yeah, definitely. So, and greenhouses have just different variables. PM becomes more of an issue when you're dealing with a greenhouse in particular, just the nature of that it's not a fully climate controlled area. You're still bringing in some outdoor air. I see that a lot. Just different variables to think about of where you're at, and ultimately budget
different engineering,
big driver.
Different engineering. I think also if you're a first-time grower or newer grower, I think you have a lot more control over a small indoor warehouse grow. It's a lot more climate control than if you're doing a greenhouse.
Yep. It lets you kind of figure out, get your feet under you, so to speak, and see what's going to work before you try to take on 20,000 square foot. So I took my first grow was 2,500 square feet, and then the next one was 20,000. So was
it a more of a warehouse grow?
The first one was a building inside of a building.
Okay.
And then the second one was a converted tomato greenhouse. So Dutch style tomato greenhouse that we turned into a cannabis greenhouse.
Okay, so let me ask you this: which product do you like better, for the greenhouse grow or the warehouse?
We got more out of the greenhouse. So from an operational perspective, I liked that because it was a little easier for planning. The finished product, I like the indoor better just because of the visual aesthetic.
Your visual aesthetic is going to be better on your indoor warehouse. Absolutely. Because you have more control over that. That's what you're going to see in high times, right? You're going to see that indoor. But I've had some really great I've had some product from outdoor grow that you don't think looks like anything, and it knocks your socks off, right? As opposed to, something that looks amazing from indoor grow. That still is great, but indoor grow, you really get that aesthetic. You're right. And then because you may have more control over it also. So.
Yep. That's where you get those really, really bright lime greens and very, very distinct white hairs and trichomes and frosty look. You get all of that stuff, which I've seen it from greenhouse also. Of course, with the combination of LEDs and just the different nutrients, and I know there's been a lot of work that's been going into some of the compost teas and living soils and giving that plant exactly what it needs. So
I gotta tell you, I'm just blown away at the chemistry involved when we're at these meetings and we're talking to the different growers, and just the chemistry and the biology, and you're putting it all together. And it's really, I used to think building was complicated, and then I'm listening to, the genetics of the new strain, and it's amazing to me, and it's awesome. Yeah.
It's really, really, really cool. It's exciting time. Really, really exciting.
Absolutely.
Time.
Yeah.
So how different is the process when you're designing and building a greenhouse versus a grow house?
So when you're designing and building a greenhouse, you're working with the greenhouse manufacturer. Okay,
Okay.
so there's companies that's what they do. They're specialized in greenhouses. Greenhouse, so they will lay it out. They'll give you the shop drawings on it. They'll even engineer it. They'll set up the automation system, kick it back to us and or the architect, right? So we'll look at it from the perspective of, you know, the slab and what type of final connections for HVAC, electric. The architect will look at it to make sure everything meets local codes, usually stamp it because the greenhouse manufacturers usually don't have, you know, a local engineer. They'll engineer it, but they can't stamp it for submittal for permits.
Yeah.
So there's just an extra party involved in it. And when you're designing indoor grow, it's usually a one-stop shop. You have either the architect that's already been hired, or it's one of our internal architects who will design it, goes to final approval to the owner. Hey, do you like this layout? Or we could send it to the grower. How's this canopy? Is everything laid out the way you want it? And then it's good to go. So greenhouse just adds one more layer of consultation, if you want to say. But again, the way we work is with the team anyway. So we're always we're all in the Zoom meetings together. You know, everybody's putting in their 2 cents, but it's just one more step is all it is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's shift over. I want to talk a bit about some of the extraction processing as we get to, we got about 10 minutes or so here left in our session today. So that's a big piece, and especially what's happening in Arizona with the new manufacturing only labs. So when would somebody want to build those? I mean, obviously they now have that option versus attaching it to a cultivation. Like when would you recommend, like based on where the customer is in their development process?
So if the customer has a license for processing, I would recommend putting it into the plan right from the beginning. Make sure you have it on the plan. Whether you finish it up is a different story, because the cost of an extraction lab, it's costly. But at the very least, what we do is, if you have a license for extraction, you want to make sure that we have a place for it on the layout, and that we stub everything in so it's ready, right? You don't need to maybe purchase all the equipment, because there's a lot of equipment that goes into it. There's a lot of power, there's a lot of gas, there's a lot of electricity, but we can stub everything in, right? So that what that means is you're bringing it all to the room, but you're not bringing in the oven, right? You're not bringing in the compressor. You're not actually bringing in that equipment, and you're not finishing it off. You're just bringing it in so that when you do want to do it, maybe 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, it's plug and play, okay? But you want to make sure that you have that ready to go, because it is very technical. And if you don't have it ready, and you know, 2 years from now say, hey, we do have this license, let's build it, you're going to look around like, how the heck are we going to get this done now? It's almost impossible. So we always recommend, at the very least, stubbing in for it and prepping the room. But if you can build it from the beginning, you know, from what we understand and from what we hear from all our clients, that's a phenomenal way to really start off and bring revenue in and generate revenue, because that's a big revenue generator for, you know, especially a startup company. You can start processing, you can start making money right away, maybe use it to fund this expansion or do this or do that. So I think if you can do it, do it. I know your next question is probably going to be, well, how much is an extraction lab or processing? So, you know, that's harder per square foot. What I will say is there's a huge differential in equipment. So for a typical, you know, extraction lab, it could run you between 250,000 and 500,000 for the same size lab, right? Maybe like a 10 by 20 or 10 by 15 lab. So that same equipment, right? They both have ovens and they both have compressors, and you have the rosin gear, and you've got, you know, distillation and the freezers and everything. But there's different levels of what you can be putting in, right? Just like you can have a $50,000 kitchen in your house, or you can have a $5,000 kitchen, right? So what you're putting in there, you have a big range, and you can have a really totally fine processing lab, you know, again for $250,000, or you can go, you know, more high end for $400,000 or $500,000. But when you're looking at a budget, right, and when you're budgeting out your project cost, even $250,000 is that's a big number there, on your balance sheet. But again, I think when you talk to the clients, that 250 or that 500 generates a lot more once it's up and running in a few years. It usually pays for itself.
Yep. Because that's a surefire way that even the need is out there, that there's a lot of biomass, and they need good labs. Most of the operators are kind of getting to where they know that there's some labs out there that can do all of that processing. So versus having all of that sort of liability, logistics, everything in-house, they're like, no, just here, I'll send this to you, send me back the distillate, and I'll make my product.
Yep. And I know Dimitri's big on the processing. He's a huge proponent that, there's gonna be such a need for processing. And, we've had talks off the sides, like processing is really where you're really going to want to try to build these things, because there's not enough out here. Other states, there's not enough product, right? So the big push is to get the product grown, get the harvest, because there's dispensaries that just can't open because they don't have product to sell. And that goes hand in hand with the processing. If there's nothing to sell, if there's nothing to, you can't open your doors to your dispensary. We've had, Missouri, they're supposed to have all their dispensaries open a year ago. I think maybe a third or fourth of them are open because there just wasn't product to sell.
Yep, supply. And actually, saw there was a new one. Was it Branson? Yeah, I'm thinking that's the article I read this morning.
Probably,
or Bentonville. I think it was. A couple of those.
They've had a big problem with getting product out there, and that's when you have all these dispensary licenses out and everybody's starting to build the dispensaries. Our recommendation is let's see what's going on with the cultivation licenses, right? Let's see, were those given at the same time as the dispensaries? Were they given 6 months previously, which would be the smart thing? So let the cultivation get up and running first.
That's what Utah did.
That's smart, right? And that's smart. And that's, and same thing with processing. Let the processing labs get built and let the cultivation get built, and then, build the dispensaries.
Yeah, you can kind of go from there. So, okay. So I do want to touch on, because this is a new trend that we're seeing of more municipalities being open to it. I know Denver, Nevada, in Vegas. I know they've been really pushing them in Oregon. We'll see if it happens up here because of Clean Air Act. But I know in LA they've been really pushing it. And there isn't anything in the Arizona law that explicitly disallows whether or not that's going to require any type of licensure on the consumption lounge. Because I know, at least like in California, you have to have a specific consumption lounge license. So it kind of remains to be seen of what Arizona is going to do there. But how is this different, like with a cannabis consumption lounge of some of the projects that you've seen? How is it different than your regular lounge?
So cannabis consumption is, I think it's a great facility, and we're building a great one right now in Michigan, a really big one. And that's where my partner comes in handy, because he came from the restaurant, bar, club world, and he designed a lot, and he's got that feel for how you want the consumption lounge to feel and to be. But we see them, number one, that you need huge exhaust systems, odor mitigation systems. And a lot of them, they're going to want a commercial kitchen, right? That doesn't mean you're going to be able to sell infused food, but you're still going to want to sell food. A lot of them are trying to get their beer and wine liquor licenses. So it's a hang, right? It's a great place to hang out, consume cannabis, watch a ball game. We're seeing a lot that have indoor outdoor spaces. So you have a nice indoor space, and then you go out, maybe there's a fire pit outside, bocce ball court, something like that. But I think that it really is going to be dependent on, how the local municipality is going to allow it, because they may say it has to be a standalone consumption lounge. The one that, we're currently doing, it's in a building where there's a dispensary, but you can't go from the dispensary into the consumption. You have to go in a common area and then go into the consumption lounge.
Okay.
So they all have different regulations on how you can build it. But I mean, I think in the next like 3-4 years, you're going to see some really great consumption lounges that are going to be similar to like going to a brewery, right? So you're going to sit in a consumption lounge and it may be right next to a greenhouse, right? On the same property, maybe with big glass windows. So you can kind of see, at a brewery, you can see the big cask where the
it's
beer's
part of
being
the
made.
experience
It's
of
part of the
why you go
experience.
into a place
Exactly.
like that.
How cool would that be? You're sitting in consumption lounge, and you're just looking at what you're smoking or what you're consuming was grown right at maybe 50 feet from you. So I think that could be a really great experience. It's going to be, it's different construction wise, right? If you're just talking about the consumption lounge, you're not dealing with a vault. I haven't seen what the security parameters are of it yet. I don't know if it's 100% surveillance, like in a dispensary or in a cultivation. If it's on the same property as a dispensary, of course, that's all going to have to be surveyed. But I've not been in the ones in California that I think are freestanding. They're their own lounges. I just know the ones in the Midwest, which are just kind of pretty laid back. Not too big. The one we're building out here is going to be pretty big, actually. I think over 3,000 square feet. But it is the new. I think it's the next thing, right? That's the next big thing now in the cannabis industry is the consumption.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, cannabis is a social substance that helps to bring people together, and that's a big aspect. I mean, that's why there's a cannabis industry, cannabis community. That is a huge piece of it. That I think it's pretty telling, just given of what the last year was like, that we're seeing this big momentum where. It was kind of on the radar, but there was a lot of hesitancy about it. And it seems like that we've maybe turned a corner of, well, we just need more reasons to get people out and get them engaged and interacting with other individuals, I think, after the last year that we've had.
and you kind of touched on something with the last year, and we talked about this in the beginning of this, but regarding the municipalities and who's going to allow you to have your dispensary, who isn't. But, with a lot of bars and restaurants closing, right, or not being open for the last year, the local municipalities are saying, well, okay, we need revenue, right? We need these tax dollars. So come on in, we're here with open arms. And I think, the last year of COVID, that push from these towns to want the dispensaries to come in, because they know that's a surefire way to get instant revenue and an instant shot in the arm for the local economy, and a really good way to start it back up again.
Yep, definitely. And they can see that. I think the biggest aha moment for me was actually about May, June of last year, where there was a representative from Oregon's government stating that cannabis was one of the few actually, no, not one of the few. It was the only industry that tax revenues were increasing, and they were helping to pick up the slack from all of the other industries that had either been shut down or just were not seeing the levels. So
don't doubt it at all.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see.
It's very cool. It is. It's great.
So I want to finish up just to kind of for some of the aspiring social equity applicants. Somebody comes to you after they get their license. This is in December timeframe, and they come and they say, David, what do I do now? What?
Yep. So a couple of things for social equity applicants specifically. We have a whole social equity plan for our applicants that we do across the country, where we will go through and evaluate the buildings from. So let's say they have a license, they have a building or a property they're looking at. We will fly out there. We will evaluate the building for them. We'll look at the infrastructure. No commitment, no, we don't charge for that. No letter of intent. We just, for all social equity applicants, that's what we do. We'll come out, we'll evaluate the building. Okay. We'll say, okay, this is what we think it'll cost to renovate this for a dispensary, let's say. We'll give them an itemized cost budget, starting from the very top of if they don't have an architect, we'll say this is the architect design fee, demolition, all the way down to here's the key, and good luck on the dispensary. So we'll do a full, like 25 itemized cost budget. We will go through, again, like I said, the municipality hearings with them. So they got their license. That's great. That doesn't mean that the town is going to allow it. So, we'll make that due diligence call to whether it's the town manager or the town attorney or the zoning minister, say, hey, if so-and-so wants to open a dispensary here, what are the odds of you guys approving it? If they say, oh yeah, we will, they just need to fill out a special use permit, great, send that to us. I'm sure they have their own attorney, but we'll kind of work hand in hand with them and fill out the special use permit, attend the hearing with them, make sure they get approval. And, then it's just a matter of bringing the whole team together, right? The architect, the designer. I think, I mentioned this before, but we've been hired strictly as a builder, where here's a set of plans, guys, and build it. We've also been called, like you said, hey, I got a license. What the heck do I do now? We say, okay, don't freak out, because it is overwhelming. We have a great architect. We have we've even brought in the attorneys, right? Because there's cannabis attorneys. They're in this industry, as you know, there's insurance just for the cannabis industry, like you name it. And so we'll just through our networking, through the expos, the people we've met, the people we've worked with, we'll bring in the whole team and make it very easy and stress-free, as much as construction can be stress-free for people. We try to offer a little bit different for the social equity applicants that we do for national or regular company. I lost you.
Yep, I was muted.
There you are.
Yep,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
gotta love Zoom. I knew that was gonna happen at least once. It's happened on one of every panel. So
of course. So so that's pretty much what we offer, and turnkey.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're getting to the end of our time here. David, I really appreciate you taking your time here today. You clearly have a wealth of knowledge throughout all different aspects. And your information is also up and available on the META Social Equity, the resources page. So we've got some information there. These videos also are going to be available for any viewers, basically from starting in July up until in December, when the rule or when the applications are going to be accepted. So anything else that you want to add to the aspiring social equity applicant out there?
You know what? We're here. You could call us. We're available for any questions. We're available to come out. Like, we go back and forth to Arizona a lot, so we'll evaluate any building, big or small, doesn't matter. Just feel free to reach out to us. Either my email, website, or the number actually on our website is my cell number, so they can call and reach me direct.
All right, there you go. When you got it up behind, it's growamericabuilders.com. So again, thank you very much, David. So we're going to go ahead and close today's session. Just another thank you for our gracious sponsor, 420 Collections, and their two product lines, 420 Skincare and 420 Medibles. So really appreciate David's time here today, and good luck for all of those applicants out there. And if you have questions, reach out. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Caleb. Thanks, man.